So let's go on to the next presentation. Okay, the tribe of Gad, Nigeria's Igbo people. This is a congregation in Newi. Okay, this is my disclaimer. The information that I'm about to present to you is taken from a Judeo-Christian worldview and backed up by the best of research and revelation to reveal the biblical, historical, archaeological, cultural, scientific, and linguistic evidence connecting the Igbo with Israel. Now, the reason I say the best of research and revelation is because by 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established. Now, if I were to give you an archaeological book from 1920 and an archaeological book from 2013, do you think that they would say the same things? Well, how come? Science is science. You know, I mean, it's truth, right? How come it would be different? Why wouldn't it be the same? Because of new discoveries, because of, you just think of all those years and all the things archaeologically that has been uncovered. So what was presented as hard, clear, factual evidence in 1920 is no longer relevant because things have progressed and things have been discovered that disproves those things that were written in 1920, and you come to 2013 and you have something that's totally different. You have all these new discoveries. So research changes. So the research, for it to be truly valid, has to be backed up as well by revelation. Now we can kind of liken this unto driving a car. Now, many of us have gone to driving school, whether it be later in life or when we were in high school, and we learned how to drive. We had a textbook, and we were taught everything, and we could drive. We even have instrumentation, which could be likened to research. Like we have GPS, we have cars that can park themselves, park assist, and we have all these instrumentations that helps us to drive. And that's all well and good, but you can still get in a car wreck. You can still get in a car accident by just only knowing how to drive. If you have a car and drive it long enough, you actually feel one with the car. If you spend enough time in that car and use that car enough, you begin to ignore the instrumentation and you drive on instinct. And sometimes if you have this automatic braking system that's supposed to brake before you crash into something, sometimes you'll brake before that does, because instinctually you know you're going too fast. Instinctually you know that the road is slippery and wet. Instinctually you know that you're too close to the car in front of you. And so you start driving on instinct rather than by the instrumentation. So revelation is very important. It's just like a fighter pilot. Sometimes the instrumentation is useless because of magnetic things that are happening in the atmosphere, or because of a storm it can knock out all the equipment. And it's like the pilot is flying blind, and they have to fly on instinct. So that instinct is likened to revelation. So by 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established. You must have research and revelation to come to an agreed consensus on the biblical, historical, archaeological, cultural, scientific, and linguistic evidence. Now, let me just say that this presentation is not exhaustive. I'm just scratching the surface. The extent of my research can be found in my book, Omenana, As in Israel, so in Igbo land, are Igbo's Hebrews. And this can be found on IgboHebrew.com. This has all the hardcore, in-depth, exhaustive evidence that I've collected over the years linking the Igbo people to the lost tribe of Gad, as well as other tribes of Israel. So what I'm going to be presenting here is just merely scratching the surface of what's in this book. So who is Gad? Genesis 30:11. And Leah said, a troop. Other translation says, what good fortune. How lucky am I that a troop can come from me. And she called his name Gad. And in Genesis 35:26, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, Gad and Asher. And these are the sons of Jacob, which were born to him in Paddan Aram. So, Gad was the 7th son of Jacob. He was the first son of Jacob and Zilpah, the handmaid of Leah, and he was considered the 5th son of Leah. And all these numbers are very significant. Numbers are very important in Judaism. There is even a system called gematria, which focuses on the importance of numbers and how they relate to spirituality. And I know that numbers are also very important to the Igbo. It means something how you break a kola nut and how many pieces the kola nut breaks into. Some of it means a good omen, some of it's a bad omen. There's certain things that you do if there's a certain number that breaks into, and etc. So numbers are very important to both people groups. So what does this mean? 1 means unity. 5 is the Hebrew number kumash. Kumash means 5. And sometimes you'll go into a Jewish bookstore and you'll find a book called the Kumash. That is telling you that there's only 5 books in that volume. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And that is the Torah, or the law of Moses. 5 also represents the fivefold ministry: apostle, prophet, pastor, teacher, evangelist. So that's very important. Number 7 means completion or perfection. So Gad itself means a fortunate army or troop. Okay, Genesis 46:16. And the sons of Gad, Zephon and Haggai, Shunai, Ezbon, which also has been called Ozni. He also goes by that name. And you also have Eri and Arodi and Areli. The Igbos claimed lineage from Gad's sons Eri, Areli, and Arodi. Possibly Ezbon or Onzi too, because those names are fairly prominent in the Igbo language. Eri means my guardian. And the king of Aguleri, Chukwuemeka Eri, he's considered the guardian of the customs and traditions of the Igbo people of that portion of Nigeria. And he still carries the name Eri as his last name. Areli means messenger or lion of God. Arodi means bronze. Arodi means bronze. Could he have been named Arodi because he was black? Very possible. And you have Ezbon or Ozni, which means hasten to hear and understand. Some believe this too to be the Ijaw people, and the Ijaw are offshoots of the Igbos. You won't hear the Ijaw saying that though. But I think it's very significant that the current president of Nigeria has an Ijaw father and an Igbo mother, and he was the first Nigerian president to go to Israel. So I think that's very significant, very prophetic, very important. So in Genesis 46:16, we read that the 3 sons of Gad, named Eri, Areli, and Arodi. I created this slideshow for people who don't know anything about Igbo, so a lot of this stuff is very elementary and repetitive for you. You know that there are different renderings of the word Igbo. And so there I'm walking with Eze Chukwuemeka Eri, and also I was able to visit Igwe Kenneth Orizu III in Enugu. So the Igbo's ancestry and other possibly related tribes of the Adoma, Ijaw, Abibio, etc. are said to come from Eri, Arodi, and Areli. May not have been the original Eri, Areli, and Arodi. The reason I say that is because you remember when John the Baptist was born. His father Zechariah was in the temple, and also this angel came to him and said, "You're going to have a son." He says, "Oh, I don't believe you." He says, "Fine, you won't be able to talk until he's born." So everybody's wondering what his name's going to be. And everybody thinks his name is going to be Zechariah. Thinks he's going to be named after his father or maybe some other relative. And his father writes on the tablet, his name is John. And they're shocked. They're like, "There's nobody in your family named John." He's like, "His name is John." And he was able to speak. So Eri, Areli, and Arodi was a name that was passed down through Gad's descendants from one generation to the next. So it may not have been the original Eri that traveled to Nigeria, but he was nonetheless a son of Gad. So it is very possible that other peoples around the world who claim to be from Gad are of Gad also, for Gad had 7 sons, 3 out of which are found in Nigeria. Now let's remember what James, which was Yeshua's brother, James 1:1 says, "A servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad," which this was written in the 1st century, only 2,000 years ago. So 2,000 years ago, James knew where the tribes were. The tribes weren't lost. Now let me explain a little something to you. There were two captivities. There was the Babylonian captivity and there was the Assyrian captivity. The Babylonian captivity took the tribes of Judah, Levi, and a little bit of Benjamin, took them off to Babylonian captivity. That captivity eventually ended, and the Judah, Benjamin, and Levi were allowed to return back to the land of Israel. Those are the people who we recognize as Jews today, because the word Jew comes from the word Judah. But there were 10 other tribes which were called either Ephraim, they were called by that collective name, or they were called the house of Israel. So the 10 tribes were taken off into Assyrian captivity. But guess what? The Assyrian captivity never ended. They were scattered throughout all over the world. And what did God say to Abraham? He says, I promise that your descendants are going to be innumerable like the sand of the seashore. They're going to be innumerable as the stars of the heavens. So is God a liar? Does God go back on his word or his covenant? No. You know what? We can take a census and count every Jew on the face of the earth. Well, if that's all there was, then God's a liar. But we know God's not a liar. There's 10 other tribes. There are people walking around on this earth who are Hebrews and don't even know it. So it says to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. So in 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people knew where Gad ended up. Knew where the sons of Gad ended up. Oh, also I would like to add, when Jesus accumulated his 12 disciples, didn't he say at one point, you are going to rule over the 12 tribes of Israel? He said, you're going to sit on thrones and you're going to judge the 12 tribes. And I've also written a book, won't go into it, but basically, I discovered that each disciple of Jesus, each of the 12 disciples, were sent to a particular tribe. And some of you are Catholic, so if you want to know who the patron saint of Gad is, I'll tell you. It's Bartholomew. Bartholomew and Thaddeus were tag team partners, missionary partners, and they both went to Gad. But it was Bartholomew who predominantly ministered to the tribes to the clans of Gad. So how did Eri, Areli, and Arodi get to Nigeria, and why are they black? We already discussed why they're black, so we'll not get into that. But I will talk about, there was a pre-Exodus Exodus. What's a pre-Exodus Exodus? You remember when Abraham was sacrificing the animals, and it was called the covenant between the parts. And Abraham split these animals in two, and what happened? He fell asleep. God gave him a dream, and he said, he prophesied to Abraham and said, this is what's going to happen to your descendants. And at one point, your descendants are going to be enslaved for so many years. Now, this prophetic revelation given to Abraham was a story that was passed down to each tribe. So when the 12 tribes were in Egypt and they lived in the land of Goshen, and they started looking around them and realizing that things in Egypt aren't as good as they used to be, and the people of Egypt are starting to, not treat them so well, it's believed that Gad's sons Eri, Areli, and Arodi said, hey, you remember what God told Abraham? Maybe these are the signs of the times, and maybe Israel's going to be enslaved. Well, if we know about this, maybe we can get out of here before we get enslaved, so let's go. So Eri, Areli, and Arodi, along with a few other clans from other tribes, as well as other peoples, because remember, there was a mixed multitude that came out with Israel during the Exodus. So I believe there was a mixed multitude also that traveled with Eri to Nigeria, one of which was Oduduwa, which was the father of the Yoruba people. He was said to be a traveling companion of Eri. So there was the pre-Exodus Exodus. And I already talked about the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities, and there was also the temple waves. There were several times that the temple was attacked, Jerusalem was attacked and fell. And these times, the tribes that were around started scattering. So they went to where they thought they would be safe. So a lot of Gadites, a lot of Israelites, a lot of Jews knew that their brothers were living in Nigeria and had a dynasty and a kingdom set up in Nigeria. So they said, we're going to be safe there, so let's go there. You also have the Masada revolt. There was a revolt at Masada, and according to most historians, everybody committed suicide. But that's not so. Josephus said that there were some that escaped and sailed off to parts unknown. So it's believed that some of them may have ended up in Nigeria. So these waves may have produced other Igbo dynasties besides the Eri and Nri dynasties and kingdoms. And if the tribes were darker than what most people believe, Wouldn't it make sense that you would want to migrate to a place where people looked more like you, where you fit in and blended in better? Because you would probably feel safer. So that's probably another reason a lot of the tribes of Israel, besides Gad, made it to Nigeria to be with Gad. So what does Igbo mean? Igbo in its various renderings is said to be derived from Shem's descendant Eber, where we get the word Hebrew from. So in English, if I was to speak proper English, I would say, what is up? But you know what? That's not what people say. People say, hey, what's up? What is up has been shortened to what's up. But the youth have shortened it even further and say, what's up? What's up? So you see how language degenerates and how language gets corrupted from what is up to what's up. So we have the word Hebrew, which actually the first Igbo slaves that were brought over, the slave poster says, fine Hebos for sale. So the slave traders even called them Hebos, or Hebrews, if you will. So we have Hebrew, Hebo, Igbo. Genesis 10:21, and to Shem also, the father of the children of Eber. So Eber, Hebrew, Igbo. So Jacob prophetically blessed the children of Gad. Gad, a troop, shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at last. So Gad was overcome by the British and by the slave traders. It says that a troop, and the Igbo people have become such a massive troop in Nigeria. It says a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at last. There was a point in time where the Igbos and Nigeria as a whole had gained their independence from Britain. They were no longer under British rule, and they were able to govern and rule themselves. So they were able to overcome at last. And also during the slave trade, the Igbos ended up in other parts of the world, and they overcame because they made something of their lives. There were some Igbos that even worked so hard as to buy their own freedom. One of them was Oduduwa Ekwano, who wrote his autobiography, and he too is talking about how the Igbo culture and people were just like Israel during the time of the judges. And we know the saying, Igbos have no king, right? So in the time of the judges, did the Israelites have a king? No, they were ruled by patriarchs, they were ruled by judges, they were ruled by elders, by chiefs, if you will. A very similar governmental structure that the Igbos still have today. Moses also prophetically blessed the children of Gad. And Gad, he said, blessed be he that enlargeth Gad. He dwelleth as a lion, and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. So basically Gad, the tribe of Gad, was given the same blessing that God gave Abraham. He says, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. He says, blessed he that enlargeth Gad. And he shall dwell as a lion, and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. There's only 3 tribes that were given the name lion. Judah, obviously, we all know that, lion of the tribe of Judah. But Gad was also called a lion, and Dan was called a lion's whelp. So we know that the Igbo in Nigeria eventually tore the crown of the head and the iron arm of the British and gained independence for themselves and began to be able to rule themselves. So these kind of hint about the Igbo people and their situation today. So what do others say about the Igbos? As I already mentioned, the former slave Oluda Ekwano, many of you have probably read his book. G.T. Basden, he was the first Anglican missionary to come to Nigeria and to encounter the Igbo people, and that is why Anglicans and Anglicism is so prevalent among Igbos next to Catholicism and then Protestantism. And when G.T. Basden was there, he started looking, he's like, oh man, there's something really familiar about these Igbos. He started reading the Old Testament, he's like, oh my goodness, everything I'm reading in the Old Testament, these Igbos are doing. He went back to his superiors and he said, hey guys, listen, I have this theory. I really believe that the Igbos are a lost tribe. Well, his superiors say, shh, don't tell them. We might lose them to Judaism. We want to convert them, so don't tell them. So they kept it a secret. And what did they do? They started converting the Jews and started teaching them to disobey Omenana. Omenana If you put that next to the Levitical law, the Torah, the law of Moses, if you will, the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, if you put Omanana right beside the Torah, they're virtually identical in almost every way, shape, and form. And so before the white man came, did Igbos eat pig? No. Did they eat prawns and crab and shellfish before the white man came? No. They ate clean animals according to the Bible. But it was the Anglicans that said, you know what, we're not under law, we're under grace, you don't have to do that anymore. So come and enjoy this ham sandwich with me. Come and dip this prawn in some cocktail sauce, you'll like it. You know, so slowly they started driving the Igbos away from their customs and traditions and causing them to forget themselves and to forget who they are, so they wouldn't even recognize themselves as a tribe if they started reading the Bible for themselves. So, and G.T. Basden also talked to other missionaries that were coming to join him. He says, look, if you want to reach the Igbo, what you got to do is know your Old Testament. If you know your Old Testament, you're going to do well ministering to the Igbo. So Israel Today and Haaretz magazine both had articles and quotes linking the Igbo people to one of the lost tribes of Israel. And I've got these particular quotes in my book. Because of time, I'm not going to read them because of the sake of brevity. But there's also an Encyclopedia Britannica in 1929 that has the link, the Igbos to the lost tribe of Gad, as well as a 1922 Torah commentary. And my good friend, Rabbi Gavriel Agugua, he is a Messianic rabbi just like myself, but he's in Orlando, Florida, and he's an Igbo man. His testimony is in that book, but it's also in that little booklet in the back that we're selling, where you could read the testimony from himself. And remember I talked about research and revelation? Well, this kind of happened backward for Rabbi Gavriel. It happened by revelation, and then the research confirmed the revelation that God gave him, connecting the Igbo people to the lost tribe of Gad. So hopefully you'll be able to get that booklet and read the testimony for yourself. But for the sake of brevity, we'll move on. Now, the Hafia warriors from Abia State in Nigeria, when they first came to Nigeria, the locals asked him who they were, and they responded, "We are Hebrews, we are Hebrews." That was according to Chief Akinga, who I met in Florida, and I was at his house, and he was telling me stories about these warriors. And he also told me that when these warriors went out to battle, they would carry a basket or carry some sort of a chest that had sacred items in it. And before the warriors went out to battle, that there would be Igbos that would go out and sing before the battle. And that they would carry this ark. And the person that was carrying this basket or this chest was unable to be killed. And this is very, very similar to the Israelites, because before a battle of the Israelites, they took the Ark of the Covenant out. And Kenaniah of the Levites, appointed by the king, sung the songs of Zion before every battle. So we see there's that connection too. In Aguilera, Anambra State, eastern Nigeria, is where the Eri Kingdom's Eze resides, and it is officially called Obu Gad, which means the compound, camp, or palace of Gad. And as we know, Eri is listed in Genesis 46:16 and Numbers 26:16 through 18 as a descendant of Gad, and this name is still the official title of the king of the Igbo people today in Nigeria. Eze Chukwuemeka Eri. Now, on the compound, there is this shrine that's built around this ancient stone throne. And at the bottom of the ancient stone throne, in cowrie shells, is an inscription. And in 1995 and 1997, Israeli Jews, rabbis, scientists, archaeologists came, and they were shown around, and they came in there, and they were shocked. They were like, "Oh my goodness, we can read this. We know what this says. This is ancient Hebrew. This is Paleo Hebrew." And basically, the rough translation means this throne is dedicated to Gad. So Eri crossed the Niger and built this throne and dedicated it to his father, Gad. Now, there has been an onyx stone found around Aguilera with a Paleo ancient Hebrew inscription of Gad. Now, the onyx stone is very important because the Levitical priest, they had a breastplate, with different stones representing different tribes with the inscriptions. They also had 2 onyx stones, one on this shoulder, one on that shoulder. And the tribes were written on this onyx stone. So I think it's very interesting that there was an onyx stone found that had the inscription of Gad. There was also a brass Star of David that was unearthed as well. And there was actually kobo coins that were minted in commemoration of that discovery. And some of you may remember those coins, or maybe you even have them yourself. So those are a little bit of the archaeological aspects. And remember, 2,000 years ago, we knew where these supposed lost tribes were. So it was known that Gad made it, or Eri made it down to Nigeria. Now what about the other tribes? I've been talking about Gad, and Gad's sons Eri, Areli, and Arodi. But could there be other tribes of Israel that ended up in Nigeria as well? Let's see. Reuben. Reuben may have traveled with Eri, son of Gad, to Nigeria, seeing as Gad camped under Reuben's banner while in the wilderness. Simeon. Due to the combined efforts of Levi and Simeon to avenge the dishonor of their sister Dinah, Jacob, Israel, links their people together and says that they would be scattered among the tribes. So Levi is found wherever Jews or Hebrews are because they're scattered. They're the priests. But also Simeon, because you put them together and it's like vinegar and baking soda. They just boil up and they just foam up. You put them together and you've got disaster on your hands. So Simeon was scattered, so it's very likely that wherever Levi is, Simeon is. Wherever Jews are, Simeon is. And so it's very possible that Simeon also ended up in Nigeria and became part of the Igbo people. Now the Nri priests perform the same functions and keep the same customs and traditions and laws as the Levites of the Old Testament. They're virtually identical in almost every way. So it's very likely, and what we would like to do in the future is what we would like to be able to maybe take some DNA samples from Nri priests to see if there is the Kohen gene present there. Judah. Judah and Levi are one of these tribes that traveled far and wide and can be found wherever Hebrews or Israelites can be found. So, if I go to Spain, I'm going to run into Jewish people. If I go to Russia, I'm going to run into Jewish people. China, I'm going to run into Jewish people. If I go to the UK or wherever on the face of the earth, I'm going to find Jewish people. And in those same places that I mentioned, do you think I can find Igbo people too? You better believe I can. Yeah, there's a saying that if you go to a place and you don't find an Igbo, then that place is not fit for human habitation. Zebulun. It is said that the Ijah was traveling companions of Eri, Areli, and Arodi as they fled Egypt. Oral tradition states that the Ijah is a son of some of the descendants of Zebulun. Some Ubulu in Igbo land, Nigeria, claim that they know that they come from Zebulun. See, again, there's the degeneration of the linguistics from what is up to what's up. So we have Zebulun, Ubulu. Issachar. If Talmudic legend tells us that Zebulun financed Issachar's studies, could we then say that wherever Zebulun went, Issachar would follow, or at least be not too far behind? If this has any truth to it, we can also say that Issachar may be among the Igbo as well. Dan. Danites are found all over Africa, the Sudan and Ethiopia especially, and it's likely that they're among the Igbo. Now, there are clans and portions of Igbos who revere the python and revere the snake. And doesn't it talk about Dan being like a snake that leaps and bites the heel of the rider and causes the rider to fall back? There might be a connection there. Asher. He was the brother of Gad through Zilpah. So Zilpah is the mother of the Igbos, right? So Asher is also a son of Zilpah. And as brothers, they may have stuck together, and it is likely they're among the Igbos as well. So, brothers that are blood brothers will stick closer together than stepbrothers. So if, Gad and Asher are brothers through Zilpah, it's very possible that some of Asher could be among the Igbo people as well. So we also have Naphtali. Shavi.org is one of the many who claim that the Igbos also have affiliation with the tribe of Naphtali, along with Gad, Dan, and Asher. Naphtali is prophesied to produce the most beautiful women in all of Israel, And the Igbo claim that their women are the most beautiful in all Africa. And I dare say that they may be right. Case in point, who did Ojukwu marry? He married a model, did he not? So many Igbo women enter and win beauty pageants and find success as actresses and models in Nollywood and in Hollywood. I was watching a show, the 4400. I don't know if any of you have watched that show or seen that show, but there's a character on there, and she is a black woman who starts out as an infant and displays these powers, and she grows up in a very short period of time. I was like, I wonder who she is. She's very attractive. So I went online. Lo and behold, she's Igbo. So Manasseh and Ephraim, their mother was a black Egyptian, and Igbo clans, which have the word Ichi or Chi in their names, according to Professor Alazi, believe that they are from Manasseh. In Newi, there is the Ichada and the Ichi subclan. You guys can pronounce it way better than me. In Anambra State, there is also the Ichi clan. In Enugu State, we have the Amechi and the, pronounce that one for me.
No.
There you go, clan. All of which have traces of Manasseh in the name within them. So finally, Benjamin. Benjamin was close with Judah and is found among them wherever that Judah went. So Benjamin was, he was kind of scattered through all the tribes as well, but stuck very close to Judah. Now let's talk about the absorption of the tribes. Predominantly, the Igbos are from Gad, but there is possible evidence that other tribes of Israel could also be among the Igbos. So what does this mean? Regardless of what other tribes of Israel are blended into the Igbo people, one thing is abundantly and refutably clear, and that is the Igbos are portions of the lost tribe of Gad through Gad's sons Eri, Areli, and Arodi. Just as in other times throughout Hebraic history, where a tribe swallows another, just in the times where Benjamin and Simeon were absorbed into Judah. Remember during the time of Judges, it was a Benjamite that created this abomination that raped a Levite's priest's wife to death. And that Levite priest chopped her up, sent her body parts throughout, and says, let's go to war with these Benjamites. And they almost annihilated them. And they said, wait. We've got to have 12 tribes. We can't have 11. Oh no, what are we going to do? We promised that we wouldn't allow our women to marry Benjamites. So they thought of a loophole to be able to save themselves and to save the tribe of Benjamin. And what they did is they had this festival where the women danced, and the Benjamites were hiding in the bushes, and they kind of turned a blind eye while the Benjamites came out and snagged these women and kidnapped them and married them. So the tribe of Benjamin was able to survive. And something similar happened to Simeon, where they were absorbed into Judah. Wherever Danites, Judeans, and Zebulunites, and Reubenites, or others from any other of the 12 tribes may be among the Igbo, for the most part, they have been absorbed and may at this point be indistinguishable from the Gadite Igbos. So Igbos of the islands. If you go to Haiti, they sing a song called Ibuleli. They have a place called Igbo Beach. In Jamaica, they have a place called Igbo Town, and they call their children Red Igbos. Now, why is this so? During the slave trade, there were two peoples that were just dropped off on these Caribbean islands. They were the Igbo slaves that were too sick. Oh, they're going to die. We can't sell them on the auction block. Let's just dump them. And then there were the other Igbos, who were strong, who were stubborn, who would not obey the white masters. And they're like, oh man, we can't do anything with them. If we try to sell them on the auction blocks, they're going to kill their white masters. Let's dump them too. So those were the two types of Igbos that were dumped on the Caribbean islands. It is believed that over 60% of Igbos have ended up in various parts of the world, and that approximately 25% of all African Americans are Igbo, as well as a good number who occupy the West Indies and Caribbean islands, such as especially Jamaica and Haiti. This is because there were some... Okay, I already explained that. So we'll just move on. Cultural indicators. Jews circumcise on the 8th day with a naming ceremony. Igbos also circumcise on the 8th day with a naming ceremony. This alone should be one of the most compelling factors, because there are hardly any other peoples of the world that circumcise who are not part of the Abrahamic faith, which I mean Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And those who do outside of that very likely are Hebrews and have possible Hebraic links, because there's such a strong tie with the covenant of circumcision in God. The Hebrews keep a lunar calendar just like the Jews do. They have Levirate marriages, Well, of course, this is before westernization and before the white man. So in Israel, if there was a man who died before he was able to have any offspring, then that wife was given to one of the brothers, and the first child that was produced would be named and considered the dead brother's child. The same exact thing happened in Igbo land. The same exact thing. So they also practice the laws of Nidah. Now the laws of Nidah are the separation of menstruating women. In Judaism, when a woman is menstruating, they do not sleep in the same bed as the husband. When a Jewish woman is menstruating, they cannot touch anything lest it be contaminated. They can't even cook food at that time when they're menstruating. They're separated. So in Igbo land, when a woman was menstruating, they lived in a separate part of the compound, and they could not cook food and all these things for the men. Just the same thing as in Judaism. The exact same thing. They bury their dead facing east and believe in a resurrection and sit Shiva. Shiva is the Hebrew word 7. And Shiva means that you mourn intensely for 7 days. So just as in Israel, so in Igbo land, they bury their dead facing east, they believe in a resurrection, and they have a 7-day or longer mourning period. At least a 7-day of intense mourning, and then the mourning lessens as time goes on. The rights of leadership and inheritance are of the firstborn, and before the white man came, they eat kosher. I already explained that. And again, I'm just scratching the surface. More of the indicators are found in the book that I talked to you about. Chazan Abraham, which is, he is an Igbo man who is a cantor, which means he teaches young people Hebrew in Igbo land to prepare them for their bar and bat mitzvah. He said in a nutshell, every law that is stated in the Torah was being practiced by our forefathers before the advent of Christianity, except that our forefathers went into idol worship. But they still kept the tradition and was handed over to them by their forefathers. Now a lot of people will say, well see, that idolatry thing, they worshipped other gods. That just proves that they're not Hebrews, because Hebrews don't worship other gods. Excuse me, have you not read the book of Judges? Have you not read the book of Kings? When did Israel get in trouble? When they started going after pagan gods. The book of Hosea is all about Israel being a whore and whoring around with other gods and making God jealous and leaving God behind. So the fact that the Igbos fell into paganism and idolatry to me is another indicator that they're Hebrews, because the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, did the exact same thing in the Bible. No different. To me, that's just another strong indicator. Now, linguistic indicators. Now, I'm just going to be talking about names here. Again, I'm just scratching the surface. There are many, many words in the Igbo language that are linked to the original Hebrew language. And it's described in the book, but I'm just going to talk about the names. In Hebrew, the name of God in Hebrew is Yahweh. We call him Yah for short, and sometimes we say El, which means God, or Elohim, which is the plural form of God. So our names carry the name of God. You have Eliyahu, which is Elijah in English. Eliyahu, which means Yah is my God. There's El, there's Yah. Yah is my God, Eliyahu. Yehoshua, or Yeshua, which has the word Yah in it, which means Yahweh, or Jehovah saves. You have Samuel, or Shmuel, which means God hears. You have Ariel, which means Lion of God. And so over here you have these Igbo names. The Igbo titles and names of God is Chi, Chukwu, and Chinike. So you can look at all these names, and most of your names has either Chi or Chukwu in it. Mine is Tochokwu, you know? So you have the name of God in your name, which is a very Hebrew tradition. Now, let me just say this. There is a movement going on in Igbo land among the Hebraic practicing Igbos, which I'm denouncing. They're trying to mix the Hebrew language with the Igbo language, and they're like, oh no, you can't call yourself Tochokwu, because Chukwu is a pagan name. I'm like, no it isn't. Chukwu, who is Chukwu? Chukwu Abiyama means the God of Abraham. Chukwu itself means the God that was not created. It's talking about the one and only true God. You know, so it's not a pagan name. So they're saying, no, call yourself Toyah. Why would I call myself Toyah? There's a man, Okechukwu, but he wants to be called Okeyah. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why mix two different languages together? It makes no sense. You can't do that. If you're going to call yourself Okeyah, just totally forget your Igbo name and call yourself something in Hebrew and be done with it. I think that's totally absurd and ridiculous. You know, I adopted an Igbo name, and that's what I use among you, Tochokwu. But my name is Yehuda. I'm not going to get rid of my Hebrew name. My English name is Christopher. I'm not going to get rid of my English name. I still have it. And those names are not pagan. But these are just scratching the surface of linguistic indicators. Now, DNA, this is something that I'm sure everybody's interested in. The E3B Halab group is found in all Jewish groups all over the world, and it is the second most prevalent Halab group in the Jewish populations. Most geneticists say that the Halab group E3B or M335 seems to have come from East Nigeria, but there was carried to the Near East, then to North Africa and Europe. Today it is commonly found in such places as East and North Africa and Near East around the Mediterranean. Evidence shows that many of the East also moved and settled in the West. So we know that the Limba people, the Beta Israel people of Ethiopia, are in the east part of Africa. But when the Igbo came from Egypt, they started out in the east and they slowly moved across Africa and ended up in Nigeria in the west. So hopefully one day we can do some genetic testing, and we may possibly, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if we find the Cohen gene among the Nri priests. So the Igbo Israel parallel histories. The first and second coup of the Biafra War is comparable to the pogroms suffered by the Jews in the diaspora. The Biafra War in many ways was like World War II and the Nazi regime against the Jews. The countries that supported Biafra has or had Jewish and or lost tribe lineages among them. 3 million Igbos were murdered in the Biafra War, and 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. The Israelites had the promised land of Canaan, and Biafra was like the Igbos' promised land. And in a later presentation, I have 13 similarities between General Ojukwu and Moses. General Ojukwu was the Moses of the Igbo people. And you know, I mean, there are different Ezes and different Igwes from different dynasties. But there's only one man that was collectively called Eze Igbo. And he was not given that by some Eze or some Igwe or some dynasty. He was given that title by the people. The people, nobody has disputed that General Ojukwu is Eze Igbo. So you see that the Igbo people, their claim of being of Gad is not a fly-by-night claim based on fiction, but archaeology, historical, cultural evidences in which new facts are uncovered year after. Here we go. The future of Gad. Revelation 7:5. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. Now, many of you believe that Yeshua, Jesus, is the Messiah. He says that one day he's coming back for his bride. Right? So is he going to come back for a blind bride? Is he going to come back for a lame bride? Maybe a bride that's missing an arm. Or maybe a bride that's missing a leg. Is he going to come back for a partial bride? 75% of a bride? No, he's coming back for a whole bride. Which tells me that it's prophetically significant that these 10 lost tribes be recognized and found, whether they're given legitimacy by the state of Israel or not. The state of Israel is a secular state. I have respect for Israel. I'm a Jew. I'm a Hebrew. I love Israel. But you know what? They are not the final authority and the final say. God is the final authority and the final say. I don't care what Israel says. God says that you are Gad, and God says that you are Hebrews, regardless of what Israel may say or think. So we see that if you go through Revelation, each tribe was sealed 12,000, which means that these tribes exist today. They're just lost. They're just hidden. They forgot who they are. They forgot their identity. But the Igbos are that roaring lion that's going to rip off the arm and the crown of the head, because they're going to wake up and finally realize who they are. So that's the future of Gad. We know that they exist today, that they've been found. What about Gad's sons, Zephon, Haggai, Shunai, and Ezbon? Some of Spaniards and South Americans, Native Americans, the Goths, French and German, the Nordics, Swedes and Scandinavians, there is evidence that these sons of Gad ended up in these various places. And again, my book, Brother Ari, Brother Osby, could Igbos and German Scandinavians be related? Now, Ezekiel 37. Remember Ezekiel 37, it says, here's a stick, right on it for Judah. Here's a stick, write on it for Ephraim or Israel. He says, take these two sticks and they will become one in your hand. So we know that the Israel was divided into two kingdoms, the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. One was led by the Davidic dynasty, another was led by, the other house was led by another dynasty. They've been separated, but prophecy, according to Ezekiel 37, says that they're going to become one again. So one day Messiah Yeshua is going to return. He's going to set foot on the state of Israel, which will be the platform to gather all of the lost tribes together. And it's going to be a shock to Judah to see all these people of different races and different colors. And God is saying, yes, this is Manasseh. Yes, this is Asher. Oh, and there's Naphtali. And oh, here's the Ebu. They're my Gadite children. Come on in. Now, if you go to this website, which is too long to remember, so just remember IgboHebrew.com. If you go to the book section of IgboHebrew.com, this is the very first book that I wrote called Finding Gad, The Quest for the Lost Tribe of Gad. There's a hard copy and a PDF file. Either one of those you can purchase. But if you want more bang for your buck and you want the hardcore nitty-gritty evidence and all the juicy stuff, get Omanana, because everything in Finding Gad is actually also in Omanana as well. So Omanana, as in Israel, so in Igbo land, are Igbo's Hebrews. That would be probably the one that I would suggest that you get, because it's more exhaustive and intensely detailed. So other helpful scholarly works. Caliban Michael wrote a book called Our Roots, the Igbo Israel Heritage. Professor Alazi, which he was also received a chieftaincy title with me during the Ovala Festival. I was able to have the privilege of sitting next to him. He wrote the Igbo Exodus, and then Remy Alona wrote several books, the Igbos, Jews in Africa, and the Igbos in Israel. There's also a DVD that you can find online called Reemerging the Jews of Africa. So a lot of people say, okay, you're this white Jewish guy who claims that the Igbos are Hebrews, that they're Gadites. Do other Jews share your opinion? Why, yes they do. Jeff Lieberman, he is a Jew. He's not a Messianic Jew like myself, so he doesn't believe in Yeshua, but he does believe that the Igbos are Gadites. And he says so in this film. And there is a synagogue in Maryland that supports several Igbo synagogues in Nigeria. Now, this other book that I added, The Ga Danjmi of Ghana, Hebrew Israelite Origins and Traditional Customs by Dr. Joseph Mensah. This man, he is an Igbo who now lives in Canada, in Calgary, Alberta. I saw this online, I saw the book, I'm like, oh, I've got to have this. I got the book, I read it, and he says that the Ga tribe of Ghana is also part of Gad. So I got the guy's number and I called him up and I explained who I was, explained the research I was doing. I said, okay, you believe your people are from Gad. Okay, what clan of Gad? Oh, we're from Eri. My jaw dropped. I said, the Ga and the Ibu are brothers. He says, yes. He says, the Ibus were already there when my people were traveling and migrating, and we traveled through Nigeria and stopped to fellowship with our Ibu brothers before we moved on to Ghana and settled up there. I said, well, I'm going to have to get our Ezes in touch with your kings. So here are the websites. I don't know if you have time to see this or whatever, but all these books that I mentioned are found on these websites. They're easily obtainable online. And basically all these books are saying what I say in my book, Omanana. All these books are saying what I'm talking to you about right now, and the same evidences that I'm giving. So these are websites. So you probably have been to Eri Kingdom or Unri Kingdom, but my main website is abrahamsdescendants.com. But I also have IgboHebrew.com. On that website contains virtually all my research connecting the Igbo people to Gad. So, you know, if you're not getting enough through this lecture, you can go home, go to this website, and read page after page, watch video after video, and get more detailed information about the things that I'm talking about tonight. Okay.